Okay. Hey, good afternoon and welcome to this Tuesday, March 23rd, 2 p.m. agenda of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee. I want to welcome everyone who's joining us. I did want to go over just a few ground rules and housekeeping to start off our hearing. If this is your first time, welcome. We're very glad that you are here. I don't assume everybody has been with us, so just a quick review. I will note that we have a 2-minute time limit that is imposed. So once your 2 minutes are up, if you can start to summarize, I'll also ask you to summarize if you get to your 2 minutes. That'll help ensure that we're able to keep all of the many important measures that are on today's docket moving. Thursday is an important deadline for us. So as many of these bills are triple referred, they do need to move out of this committee expeditiously. Also, I'll ask if you can please keep yourself muted unless you are called on by me to give your testimony. That'll help facilitate this hearing for everyone watching today to cut down on ambient noise. Also, I just asked, as on many of these issues, there are passionate thoughts and perspectives on both sides, and we appreciate hearing that here. I think that leads to robust discussion, but I would ask you to please demonstrate aloha for each other and in your testimony. That's my ask, and it's my humble ask, and it's also my expectation of this committee, so that we make sure that we preserve our decorum and comport ourselves in a way that I think makes Hawaii proud. So with that, we'll move on to our first agenda item, which is SB 566, SD1, HD1. This is relating to homestead exemptions. This requires the Legislative Reference Bureau to conduct a study to determine the increase to the homestead exemption in bankruptcy proceedings. We have our only testifier who has indicated that they will be here virtually to speak. Marvin Dang with the Hawaii Financial Services Association offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Marvin Dang, attorney for the Hawaii Financial Services Association. We offered our comments. Let me just briefly cover a few of the points. So this homestead exemption is not to be confused with the homeowner's exemption for real property tax assessments. This is for an exemption against creditors. We feel that the current version of this bill is better than the previous versions. The previous versions had dollar amounts of $2 million and $350,000. Currently, the homestead exemption here in Hawaii is either $20,000 or $30,000. So a study, I think, is certainly the way to go. And there was reference in the current version where the LRB would seek input from financial institutions. We would ask that the financial institutions be represented by the Hawaii Financial Services Association, the Hawaii Bankers Association, and the Hawaii Credit Union League. In other words, LRB would reach out to those trade associations to get the input on behalf of financial institutions. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. That concludes our scheduled testifiers for this particular measure. Members, please note we also have comments and opposition from different organizations. Members, any questions on SB 566? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 659 SD2 HD1. This is relating to low-income housing tax credits. This would allow low-income housing tax credits to be allocated among the partners or members of the partnership or LLC earning the credit. In addition, it would also extend the increases made to the tax credit to 2027, and it would apply the taxable years beginning December 2020, after December 2020. On SB 659, we have Denise Matsubara with the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, Denise Matsubara for HHFDC. We'd like to stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Isaac Choi from the Department of Taxation offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Shiraishi for the Department of Taxation, and we stand on our written testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. We also have Sandy Wong with Dowling Company Incorporated offering support.
I'm here, Chair. I will stand on my written testimony on support. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Tom Yamachika with the Hawaii Tax Foundation offering comments.
Thank you, Chair, members. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We are concerned primarily that the bill is a revenue loser and would be problematic under Section 9901 of the American Rescue Plan Act that was just signed into law. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. We also have Will Kane from Sugar Creek Capital in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Will Kane on behalf of Sugar Creek Capital. We stand on our written testimony, and we would offer also that discussions with the Treasury Department is happening across the country for all these LIHTC programs, and so we would ask that this continue until those discussions can be concluded. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Lori Lum from Hunt Companies, Hawaii and Hunt Capital Partners in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lori Lum on behalf of Hunt Companies. We are in support of this measure and echo the comments of the previous testifier. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Members, please note that we also have comments and support proffered from different organizations and departments. That's the extent of our present testifiers in this virtual hearing on SB 659. Members, any questions on this measure? Okay, seeing no questions.
Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Representative Har, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I have Denise Matsubara from HHFDC, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Director Matsubara. So the testimony seems overwhelmingly in support of this measure. There is a little bit of testimony with some concern regarding, I think you heard the testimony of the Tax Foundation that this is considered a revenue loser. But could you and why, what the variance, how that would be offset?
As far as the tax consequences go, I would have to defer to DOE tax.
I'm not talking about the tax consequences. I'm talking about the benefit to the state regarding the low-income housing tax credits for affordable housing for HHFDC. Why are you guys in support of this measure?
Oh, it's to promote affordable housing and really to broaden the pool of investors and really to, I guess, to increase demand and the pricing for the credits go up when it becomes more competitive.
Okay, you know what? Let me have. Is there any who's online right now from representing a developer right now? Lori Lam, can you answer some questions?
Great.
Or
Sorry.
Will,
Yeah, I'm
okay,
unmuted.
you want to
Hi,
answer
yes,
some
I'm here.
questions?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Capital. Understand why exactly are you folks in support? Mr. Kane, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I only heard part of your question, but I think you're asking why we're in support of this. I'm sorry, it's the feed is cutting out a little bit.
Can you just explain why exactly? Because there's been some, the concern is that this is a revenue. Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're cutting in and out. Sometimes you freeze a little bit, but I think everybody's got the gist of it. Why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I think I can answer if you want. And
Please go ahead.
If I'm answering a different question, please stop me. So essentially, as the director, HHFDC folks said, So there's two parts, right? Is extending the credit, but then also opening the pool. So what's happened now is the way that it's structured, it limits the amount of, it limits the types of people or organizations that can buy these tax credits. And so it, without that competition, the price of those credits are starting to drop. And so what this does is it doesn't offer more credits on the market. It just allows more people to compete for those credits, which as HE said, they pointed out, more competition drives up the price, which means there's more money available from the private equity side for low-income housing tax projects across the state.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kane. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Members, are there any additional questions on SB 659? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is SB 749. This is relating to the Public Housing Authority. This would allow HPHA to build non-subsidized housing. First off, we have Director Kwanzaki from Hawaii Public Housing Authority offering comments.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chairs, member of the committee. We stand on our testimony, providing comment and supporting the bill. I just want to summarize that couple of things. One, this will apply to the lands that we already have and the public housing is in it. And it is not to replace public housing. It is in fact to increase, to maintain the public housing and to increase the amount of units by going vertical. This is something that it's necessary due to the long wait lists that we have and the age of the properties. The average property is more than 56 years of age. And to be able for us to do that, it is a recommended that you do not concentrate the poverty and have all public housing in one area, but that you have a mixed income developments that one unit is identical to the other, irrelevant of what the income is. We do serve the very poor and vulnerable of our community. The average income that we serve, it's less than 20%. And for our public housing component, it's irrelevant of the income. We still serve the folks. Also, when we apply for grants with HUD, and the majority of our properties are federal properties, when we apply for grants, there is a heavy point awarded to the mixed income development, as HUD does not encourage concentrating the poverty. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. And just to mention that our public housing, our developments of affordable housing, it's for everyone, including the Hawaiian brothers and sisters that we serve so many. Thank you so much. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Aloha.
Thank you. We also have Wayne Tanaka with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs in opposition.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Wayne Tanaka for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. You do have a written testimony. We'll stand on that. I'll also note a couple of things. First, apart from our ceded lands claims, from a consumer protection perspective, the committee may want to consider whether there has been an assessment of HPHA's capacity, staff, expertise, sophistication to develop, negotiate, and monitor the much more lucrative, potentially very complex mixed-use market rate development contracts that would be authorized by this measure without compromising HPHA's ability and capacity to administer the various and very valued public housing projects and programs that are already in its portfolio. Second, I just wanted to speak to a proposed amendment and the only feedback that we've gotten so far from developers on this kind of language, which is that developers think our amendment is too bureaucratic. When I hear that reasoning, I can't help but think about what Stanford Doe said after the insurrection when he was trying to write a constitution that would specifically exclude Native Hawaiians and in that case Portuguese from government and governance. He was seeking advice from Professor Burgess on the continent on how to do this, and this is what he wrote. There are many natives and Portuguese who have had the vote hitherto who are comparatively ignorant of the principles of government and whose vote will be a menace to good government. And so he got the advice he wanted, was able to write a constitution that did in fact keep Hawaiians and Portuguese from participating in elections and in government and governance. And so when I hear developers' response to our amendment as being too bureaucratic, I can't see how this isn't a repeat of what Sanford Doe did or was trying to do, which is take a stereotype about Hawaiians, or in this case, a Hawaiian serving agency, as being too unsophisticated to participate, and to use that stereotype to deny Hawaiians a seat at the table in the governance of stolen Hawaiian lands. So in closing, please respectfully do not pass this bill as drafted. Please do not perpetuate the historic injustice that has contributed directly to the housing and myriad other challenges Native Hawaiians continue to face today. And do not perpetuate the application of unfounded assumptions that have contributed to these challenges. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Wayne. We also have M. Healani Sonoda Pale with Kalahui Political Action Committee in opposition.
Aloha, aloha, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa and members of the committee. Kalahui stands on its testimony in strong opposition to this measure. Our concern is similar to that of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and regarding the ceded lands in Hawaiian Kingdom, Crown and Government lands, all of which have been illegally seized. And on kind of echoing what Wayne Tanaka was saying in terms of just from a consumer perspective, right now the median price of a home on Oahu is $920,000. The Public Housing Authority's mission is to provide affordable housing and shelter. We are in the midst of a pandemic. I don't see anything good coming out of using public funds and resources and public lands, aka Hawaiian Kingdom, Crown and Government lands, using all of this to provide housing that somebody like Zuckerberg could qualify for. Having no income qualification for housing that is that utilizes public funds and resources is, to me, is a little bit. It's like, are we living in the reality that we're living in, all of us? Are we all in the same economic crunch? Are we still living in the pandemic? I'm really concerned about this bill. We are going to be building, if it goes through, we are going to be building homes for millionaires and their families. So, and if they can, with no income qualification, it's just, I mean, we could have Zuckerberg's kids living in public housing one day. Mahalo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see. Members, please note we have numerous additional organizational and individual testimonies in opposition on this measure. That's the extent of testifiers indicating that they would be present to testify on SB 749. With that, we'll move to our legislative member question and answer period. Members, any questions on SB 749?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wansafi.
Aloha.
Hakeem. Aloha, Hakeem. Thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony. So there is quite a substantial amount of testimony in opposition, and you did hear some of the concerns that were just raised verbally. Do you want to respond to any of that? To any of, are any of these concerns actually warranted, or do you want to respond to any of this? Because I don't necessarily read the bill that way, but I'm not sure if the potential that has been raised from some of the testifiers in opposition is in fact, within this measure. So could you clarify, please?
Yeah, thank you, Representative, for the question. I believe there is a tremendous amount of misunderstanding. The reason we're doing this is so that we can increase the affordable housing and not the other way around. The only way that Zuckerberg will qualify if his income is 50% EMI or less to be with us. However, the financing mechanism, sometimes you have to do, in addition to public housing, which irrelevant of the income, if they make zero, we still serve. Then you have the affordable housing, 60% EMI or less. Sometimes it is necessary for us to lessen the burden and for the consumer to be able to accomplish two things. One, anything that's market rate, and we're not building $1 million homes, so not even close. To do the market for a teacher or somebody else, that money helps to subsidize the lower income. That's number one. And number two, the formula of putting all poor people in one area is a dead formula. In Chicago and other places, they actually demolished to the ground those units because they have proven not being sustainable. And we're doing rental here. So we're doing rental. We're not doing seeded land for sale or giving the land. We're very sensitive to that. And we're very sensitive to that because a huge portion of our folks that we serve are actually of Hawaiian. As far as the capacity, we would not be involved if we did not have the capacity. I think every agency like ours that's managed by 11 board members, they know what we can embark and what we cannot. And it depends on the area. Not all of our developments will be having that market. For example, the school street that we have negotiated and we're going to have shovel in the ground the end of this year, it's 100% affordable because we were able to find mechanism to fund it. 100% affordable, and with us is 100% affordable for life. So I believe there is some misunderstanding in folks reading the bill, but we are here to provide affordable housing, and when it's necessary for the protection and for the betterment of taxpayers, not to be heavy on taxpayers' money, it is necessary to bring that market component, not only to finance it, so that our keiki, whose parents are making zero income, they're sitting and studying, and with somebody who's making 100% EMI on market.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation, Mr. Wansafi, because I was a little bit, I just couldn't see some of the concerns that were being raised from the bill, but I could definitely understand that there might be some misunderstanding on this measure. So just to be clear then, so is it HPHA that would in fact develop the units? You guys would be the developer, or would you enter into public-private partnerships?
We always enter into private-public partnerships for two reasons. One, the ability of the private developer to raise funds. And second, to use their expertise that it's needed. However, we do strict things in there. For example, in our RFQs and our master development agreements, community engagement is a must. School Street, we have done a dozen of communities so we can build for the community. We're not building for somebody who's not here, we're building for the community, and we adjust accordingly. But we do believe that the best way for us and to minimize the amount of taxpayers' dollars is that we embark on private-public partnerships.
Okay, and just to be clear then, any of the developments that would be built then through these public-private partnerships would only be rentals, correct? That none of these are for sale?
Yeah, they are. Yes, they are rentals, 100% rentals. At this time, we don't have anything that's in the plan to do anything that's for sale. And I think our sister agency can well take care of that. They're very experienced to do that. And again, this is only to serve everyone, including our brothers and sisters, the Hawaiian people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wansafi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 739? Representative Onishi.
Yeah, I have some questions for the public housing. So these projects, they are entirely non-subsidized housing?
The project that we select, all the projects that we have, there is two kinds. There is the federal properties, and we have about 60 out of 85 properties. Those will receive federal dollars from HUD. They are 100% subsidized. And then we have the state properties, public housing, 864 units. Those by statute, we must run them out of break even. There is no profits, whatever the case may be. And but the legislature has been given additional money so we do not raise rent. And the properties we're talking about that we're going to develop are the properties that we already own, that HPHA already own, starting with those that may be along the rail line and starting with the federal properties, because with that comes certain amount of subsidy from the federal government.
Okay, so I guess my question was, are these projects all non-subsidized housing?
Once they are developed, there will be a combination. There will be subsidized as in public housing. There will be tax credit properties, and there may be the need, depending on the project, to also have market to be able to pay for the others.
In the same housing development?
Correct. That is the what is recommended trend, is to make sure that there is mixed income in any development, and not to have this is for public housing and this is for market, and this is, you put them all together, the units will be identical, they look identical, they smell and feel identical. The only reason somebody will know who's in that unit if they share that information. So it will be a public housing resident who's making zero. It could be next door adjacent condo, for example, to somebody who's husband and wife working, teachers, or whoever they are.
Okay, so are there percentage set-asides like in current housing development projects?
Yeah, thank you. So we start with, by law, the fair clause, we can only replace 1 for 1. So if we go to a development, for example, that has 300 public housing units, we will replace 300 public housing units, plus we'll add affordable housing units because we go in vertical. And then we calculate how much we need, how much we need to have market. The last performa that we did for a project, out of 2,500 units that we were proposing, only 300 were going to be market. The other 2,200 were going to be affordable housing and public housing.
And how much commercial development?
It really depends on the area. For example, on School Street, that we're going to have 100% affordable housing, mixed income. There's going to be some offices because this is for seniors, 100% seniors near Lanakila Center. And then we go through the community service and assessments. We have multiple meetings with the community. And then based on the assessment, what is the need, we determine the square footage. And that's to enhance the project. It is not for profits. For example, for School Street, we don't anticipate anything other than what is needed for the seniors. It could be a coffee shop, as an example, an area that we provide for pharmacy, as an example, for the seniors, those kind of things. It's mainly to enhance that development and make it comprehensive. And that's why, as an example, for School Street, we talking, trying to team up with the senior center to be able to provide for the entire community and for the people we serve.
So in these projects, who then authorizes you guys to move ahead with these projects? Who's going to look at the scope and the design of the project, what it's going to provide in order to make an assessment on whether or not this is a public good or not?
So we have we have the board of directors consisting of 11 board members that they will have to review, approve or disapprove whether or not we develop, first of all, and if we do, it goes through the procurement process for selection process, and that's a process in itself. Then it goes back to the board and the legislature. All of the project we do, because it has the affordable housing and public housing component, will create a gap. So we have to go, as we have, there is a bill right now, for example, for School Street. So we always go to the legislature, and our master development agreements that we write, always it says all our funding are subject to legislative approval and appropriation.
Okay, well, I mean, I hope you can see why people are concerned, because there's no details, there's really no structural parameters on what's going to be developed and how much of it is, well, how you determine this really public good. And, so I think that some form of, authentication or approval is a necessary requirement for moving these projects forward. So I hope you can appreciate that concern, which I think is being expressed in terms of how these are being developed.
No, I certainly do, Representative. We are an agency that exists for the public good. We care about everyone here in Hawaii as much as how anybody else. No one cares more than we do. We are from here. We work here. Everything we do is to provide to our community. And our community is irrelevant who they are. We serve everyone, and we'll continue to do that. But I understand that people might feel that we're building for the millionaires and all of that. That is not why we exist. And that's why a community engagement that we do, that is a must. We do it in RFQ and in the Master Development Agreement, is so that we can listen to everyone. And we go through the same process. We go through the EIS, and we mailed the letter to get the feedback to over 30 Hawaiian organizations to get the feedback, including the community around us and other organizations. So yes, I think before there is a shovel in ground, there is a tremendous amount of opportunities and time for the entire community to weigh in. And we do listen, truly, we do listen.
Well, as far as for my district, I have concerns about your ability to manage these properties properly. As you know, over the years, there've been a lot of discussions. Little disappointed in the development at Lanakila Housing, that it's still single family duplex units versus a higher density mode. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Legislative members of the committee, are there any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is SB 348. This is relating to bottled water. This repeals the requirement that non-carbonated bottled water be transported, stored, processed, or bottled through lines or equipment through which only water is passed. First up, we have the Sierra Club National Marine Team in support. Joy Shi.
Aloha, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa. On behalf of Sierra Club's over 1 million members, the Sierra Club Marine Team strongly supports SB 348. We strongly support this legislation because of its environmental benefits and that it will help to alleviate our Opala problems. Aluminum is infinitely recyclable without losing its integrity and is an excellent alternative to plastic. In fact, 75% of all aluminum that has ever been produced is still in use. So Hawaii is the only state that does not allow the bottling of non-carbonated water on the same equipment that is used to bottle other beverages. So all health and safety regulations are already in existence and are ready to be implemented. The pandemic has highlighted the vulnerabilities to supply and distribution chain problems. So Hawaii needs to be able to sustainably bottle its own water rather than relying on imports from the mainland. And so we support this bill because of both its environmental and economic benefits. I'm available if you have any questions, and thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. Mahalo.
Thank you. We also have Lauren Zerbel from the Hawaii Food Industry Association in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFIA. We're in support of this measure. Many people don't know that the canned and bottled drinks that they enjoy here in Hawaii are actually locally made products. Internationally and locally known beverage brands are all bottled and canned right here on Oahu. The current statute hurts our beverage manufacturers' ability to can and bottle water. This bill would pave the way for more local beverage manufacturing. And the piece of statute being removed is not law in any other state, and there's no reason to keep it on the books. We thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Members, please note that that's the extent of our present testifiers indicating that they would testify on this particular measure. Please also note that there are numerous other businesses and organizations and departments providing supportive testimony and comments. Members, any questions on SB 348? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 348, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 756. This is relating to electric vehicles. This has three parts. Part one allows the counties to adopt ordinances with respect to the establishment of penalties for failure to comply with its requirements to make reasonable efforts to maintain electric vehicle charging stations in working order. In addition to some other changes, part two establishes a sub-account in the PUC for electric vehicle charging system rebate. I'm sorry, I didn't mention in part one, a major change is to the actual vehicle, the number of parking stall requirements that dictates new electric charging station requirements. And then part three would be an appropriations for the electric vehicle charging system rebate program. On SB 756, we have our first testifier, the Department of Transportation and Support.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. Jade Butay for DOT. We stand on our testimony in support.
Thank you. We also have Chris Yunker from the Hawaii State Energy Office in support.
Hello, this is Chris Yunker from the Hawaii State Energy Office. We stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Commissioner Jay Griffin from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Michael Chapman on behalf of Jay Griffin, PUC Chair. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Myung Oh with the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Myung Oh here on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. Our opposition is limited to Part 1, Section 3, which increased the minimum amount of electric EV charging stations from 1 stall to 5 for every 100 stalls by 2025. That concludes my testimony, but I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Wendell Ilento, Boma, Hawaii, in opposition.
Hi, thank you, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa. You have our testimony, the Building Owners Managers Association, also known as BOMA. We do support Senate Bill 756, the enforcement part of it. However, where we take exception is SB 756 requires 5 spaces per 100 in existing structures. And stakeholders work extensively with policyholders and leaders at the city and county and to support legislation, but it was aimed at new construction. And unlike the city and county ordinance, State Senate Bill 756 would apply to existing buildings. And that's really costly. Retrofitting existing buildings is almost twice as much as new construction. And just one example I want to close with is Ala Moana Center, 11,000 parking stalls. What this bill would mean is that 1,100 charging stations and all the infrastructure and all the engineering drawings and all the permit fees will be needed to add all of that, those charging stations to Ala Moana Center. And it's right about $35 million. And so that's why we oppose this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have June Chi with Hawaiian Electric in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. June Chi testifying on behalf of Hawaiian Electric, and we stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Ted Bolin with Climate Protectors Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Climate Protectors is a group focused on mitigating the climate emergency that we face. if we're going to reach our climate goals, we need to have progress made on the emissions from the transportation sector, which is the largest sector. If we're going to have that kind of progress on the ground transportation sector, we need to have a robust infrastructure of charging. And therefore, the climate protectors favor this bill strongly, but also urge that the 2030 goal of 10 charging stations and parking stalls per 100 spaces in a parking structure be reinstated into the bill. It's very important that we get more charging. It's not going to work if we don't have chargers. And so this bill provides an opportunity to do that. I recognize their costs. And but, you know, if you look at what's happening in the automobile industry, all kinds of car companies are moving quickly toward electric vehicles, or at least for zero emission vehicles. And we need to be ready for that by having a charging infrastructure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I am available for questions.
Thank you. We also have Melissa Miyashiro at the Blue Planet Foundation in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm Melissa Miyashiro with Blue Planet Foundation. Blue Planet supports SB 576. This bill helps to address one of the major challenges that we face in transitioning to clean transportation, which is expanding our public charging options for those that currently don't have access to EV charging at home or at work. The existing law that requires at least one EV charger in publicly accessible parking lots with 100 or more stalls has been on the books for more than a decade, since 2009. And unfortunately, we haven't seen the build out of EV infrastructure that the legislature envisioned way back then. So we think that this is an important measure to update the law and prepare Hawaii for the coming transition to electric transportation. And just a quick note about some common misconceptions. Nothing in this bill requires that landowners or retailers offer the charging for free. And it doesn't require that the parking stalls be in a prime location. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. We also have David Melanix, our Revolution Hawaii, in support.
Aloha, Chair and committee. My name's Dave Melanix. I'm with our Revolution Hawaii. I'm representing our 7,000 members statewide. I'm standing strong support. You know, climate change is not waiting for us to get ready. It is getting worse every year, in fact, every day. And so we have to start now to respond. The automobile industry is already starting to move from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. Many people in the state of Hawaii want to buy them, but because we don't have the infrastructure, it makes it very hard for them to have a vehicle that's going to be appropriate to deal with climate change. The state has committed itself to do something about climate change, and this is a very good step forward. So we're very supportive of this. We encourage you all to vote for it. This is a necessary step. If we don't start taking these steps, we're going to suddenly be in a position where we won't have any vehicles to run because it'll be outlawed. You can't use fast vehicles anymore because they are killing our planet. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. We also have Sandy Wong from Tesla in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair. This is Sandy Wong on behalf of Tesla. We are in support of this measure. We are especially in support of Part 1, which changes the number of parking stalls from 1 to 5. As Ms. Miyashiro stated, when this law was originally passed, it was 2009, and it was 1 stall. Here we are in 2020, and we think it's time to increase the amount of stalls, especially since the uptake of EVs has grown drastically in these past few years. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Matthew Geyer from Faith Action Environmental Justice Task Force in support.
Aloha, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Matt Geyer, Chair of the Environmental Justice Task Force of Faith Action for Community Equity. And we support this measure. And personally, I support this measure because I've had the experience of owning an electric vehicle and looking for rental properties that had a charger on them, and I wasn't able to find one. So I tried to rent for a few months and use the publicly available chargers. And that was not working. They're broken down, they're they're filled up, and more EVs every day. We need 5 per 100 would be a good number to have now. That's a bare minimum. We need to be thinking about the future and thinking about increasing that number even more than 5 per 100. So we are trying to go, our state goal is to go 100% renewable. That means, we need a lot more charging stations. So please continue to support and strengthen these climate change measures. And I appreciate you guys hearing this bill.
Thank you. We also have late testimony from Tina Yamaki with the Retail Merchants of Hawaii in opposition.
Aloha and good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Tina Yamaki with the Retail Merchants of Hawaii, and we are not in support of this bill. We've been supporting environmental issues, but this one is a little different for us too. EV only makes up 1% of the cars on the roadways in Hawaii, and this bill does not consider ADA parking requirements. So if you guys are not aware, for every 100 stalls, we need to provide 4 ADA parking stalls and 1 van accessible stall. And van accessible stalls take up 2 parkings. So in essence, of the 100 stalls, 6 of them already go to ADA. And ADA is easy. You just paint on the pavement or the parking lot. Charging stations for commercial use are not cheap. Their costs anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 per charger. And this does not include, like some of the other gentlemen have said, the cost to tear up and replacing existing parking lots and installing the electrical needed, and to also include the permit and everything else that's involved with this. It's going to cost some businesses millions of dollars. And these are not just the large shopping centers. These are the mom and pop strip owned malls are also going to be heavily affected by this, and they're going to have to pay for it too. And when you take out all of these stalls during that time, stores do not make money on that because people do not come when there's inconvenience with the parking. We also want to talk about that, shopping malls and retailers outside of the urban area find that these EV charging stations are not being used very often. I actually called my members. I live in Mililani. I called people all the way out in Laie, Haleiwa, and they say their chargers are hardly being used. It's being used by residents because they do not want to have to pay higher electrical bills, so they come and try and get free EV charging. And yes, shopping centers don't charge, and that's because we get those chargers for free. So we don't have to pass the cost on to the customer. If we have to pay millions of dollars to install these things, it's going to go in the CAM costs. CAM costs go to the tenants. Tenants are going to pass it on to our customers. So it's our keiki, our kapuna, everyone. The price of goods are going to go up in Hawaii, and Hawaii is going to be even more expensive. The cheaper way to do this is to look at new construction. That's the only way we can do it. Shopping centers right now, even in Hawaii, have gone bankrupt or have also filed for bankruptcy. This is going to cost them a lot of money, and this could close more businesses down. This is something we can't afford right now. So thank you for this opportunity to testify, and we will be available for comments or questions.
Thank you. Members, please note that's the extent of, I'm sorry. Is the Tax Foundation of Hawaii, Tom Yamachika, are you here with comments on this measure?
Thank you, sir. Yes, we are here. We have submitted written comments. Our concern is primarily with the special fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I also skipped over Ulupono Initiative, Micah Munekata, in support.
Aloha, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, members of the committee, Micah Munikati on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We'll just stand on our testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Please note that now that is the extent of our present testifiers on this measure for this virtual hearing of SB 756. Members, any questions on SB 756?
Sure.
Representative Onishi.
Yeah, Ms. Miyashiro, Blue Planet. I think you testified that the owners of the properties can charge fees for the charging. In the bill, it says reasonable fee. What would you consider to be a reasonable fee?
Thank you, Representative Onishi. Yes, and how it currently works in the current law that's on the book, the business or property owner will decide how much to charge for that charging benefit. So, and it really varies by property. So some retailers will charge, by kilowatt hour, or will offer, a short time for free, maybe 30 minutes for free, or 2 hours for free, and then charge after that. There is the benefit, as was mentioned, about driving traffic to these retail establishments. So many people, like I'm a Nissan Leaf owner, and will often decide which properties I want to visit based on where I can charge. I live in an apartment building and don't have charging at home, so I really rely on this public charging network, and I'm happy to pay for the electricity to do that. So I have no problem, paying for electricity to charge my vehicle.
Well, but what would be a reasonable fee?
I mean, I think what's reasonable is based on the same price that the business owner pays for that electricity. I think that's absolutely reasonable. I think it would be unreasonable if there was some kind of exorbitant upcharge for the electricity, but that doesn't seem to be the case currently, and it's not something that we see in other jurisdictions either.
What about the cost of installation? Is that recoverable?
Under the existing law, it's not. So that's something that the business owner would have to pay for the installation. But then they can, again, charge for that electricity.
But you just said that you couldn't charge more than the cost.
I'm not saying
how is the owner going to make back the cost of investment?
Yeah, I apologize if I wasn't clear about that. I think there probably is more discussion on exactly how we would define reasonable. I think that language is inserted into the law to ensure that there isn't that absorbent upcharge for property owners. But I think EV owners that rely on the public charging network are happy to pay their fair share of having that benefit. So that possibly could include some recovery of the cost of installing and maintaining the charging station. So there's also maintenance that has to happen. We've seen that many charging stations that were installed aren't being upkept and aren't kept in working order. So from Blue Planet's perspective, we think it's absolutely reasonable to include that the upkeep costs that the property owner incurs as part of offering this public benefit for offering EV charging.
Would you be opposed to a definition of reasonable fees that includes the cost of electricity, the cost of the development for the EV charging station, and its annual maintenance or ongoing maintenance?
From Blue Planet's perspective, we wouldn't be opposed to providing more clarity about that. And there might be others joining us today that can talk more in more detail about the specific costs who work on the technology side. But that's certainly something that Blue Planet would be supportive of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 756?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Blue Planet, sorry, can I just ask, and this is just a question for my own edification because you said that you own a Nissan Leaf. So when you purchase an EV, don't most people purchase their own type of charging, system for their home?
Yeah, most people who currently feel comfortable going electric are those that have access to charging at home. So my husband and I decided we lease our vehicle and we decided to go electric even though we don't have charging at home. So I live in an apartment building in Mo'ili'ili, and we don't have the option of installing EV charging at our apartment building. So that's why we rely on the public charging network.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, so that's a little bit of a different situation, but I'm thinking somebody who lives in a single family home, I mean, I'd just be confused as to why they would have to go to one of these public charging stations. I would just assume that they would want to have that convenience of having the charging station at home.
Yeah, and that likely is more convenient for people that are in a position to live in single family homes. And, and as you know, so many of our residents don't have that
Okay,
luxury.
thank you for that. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I ask one more question, please?
Please proceed.
Mr. Yamachika, Tax Foundation. Mr.
Yes,
Yamachika?
Representative. Thank
Yes,
you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to really, I perused your testimony quickly, but I didn't really understand the crux. In your verbal testimony, you indicated your issue with the special fund. And, you know, the way I look at it when I look at the synopsis of this bill is, you know, the portion, the sub-account in the PUC special fund for the electric vehicle charging system rebate program. But is that not what you were referring to?
Representative, in accordance with our general principles, which we publish on the website, we're generally not comfortable with any form of tax earmarks, you know, any earmark off the particular tax that go directly to a special fund instead of being accounted for in the general fund, going to the debt limit and so forth. So one of the features of the bill as it now reads is that there is going to be a special an earmark off the barrel tax, which is you know, part of the fuel tax chapter, and that would fund this program. We you know, state finances, it should be funded through the general fund, just like anything else.
Okay, so so your testimony is more of the general concern from the Tax Foundation standpoint with respect to general funds. I mean, I'm sorry, with respect to special funds.
Yes, Representative, thank you very
Okay,
much.
got it. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any other questions on SB 756? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 920. This is relating to state light duty vehicles. So many parts in all these EP bills. Part 1 establishes a clean ground transportation goal for state agencies to achieve 100% light duty motor vehicle zero emission fleet by 2035. Part 2 authorizes the Department of or DAGS to approve a state fleet acquisition, including zero emission vehicle requirements for light duty passenger cars and light duty multipurpose passenger vehicles and trucks, and allowance for exemptions. And Part 3 requires state and county agencies to purchase building materials for the project that reduce the carbon footprint of the project whenever feasible or cost effective. On SB 920, we have the Department of Transportation support. Department of Transportation, are you here?
Yes, sorry. Oops. Sorry, Chair Johansson, I'm having trouble.
No problem. We can hear you just fine.
Yeah, this is George Absetti, the Highways Administrator. Thank you for this opportunity to support this bill. We stand by our testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We also have Chris Junker with the Hawaii State Energy Office in support.
Hi, this is Chris Junker on behalf of the Hawaii State Energy Office. We stand on our written testimony and support and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Micah Munikata with the Lupono Initiative in support.
Thank you, Chair. We'll stand on our testimony and support.
Thank you. We also have June Chi with Hawaiian Electric in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Hawaiian Electric stands on its written testimony in strong support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Ted Bolin with Climate Protectors Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Climate Protectors stand in strong support of this measure. The other measure we spoke of a moment ago was for charging. The other half of this is the leadership of the state in purchasing or leasing electric vehicles. This bill is a big step in the right direction by requiring that we move to all electric vehicles by 2036. The one amendment I would suggest on that is that it needs to be earlier than 2036, given the developments that we're seeing in the electric vehicle industry. And here it's a point to take into account is that the state saves money when they go to electric vehicles because the maintenance is so much less. There's a lot of maintenance on an internal combustion engine and not so much on an electric vehicle. So the state, by purchasing fleets, could save a lot of dough. So I would strongly urge, for environmental reasons as well as costs, that we move that date up to 2030 in this bill. The bill also refers to building materials. This is important as well. Cement is 7% of global emissions of greenhouse gases. So when the state is able to use lower emission building materials as called for in this bill, it can save a lot in terms of climate change. And just to reemphasize what is perhaps obvious, we're looking at a century when we may be underwater in a lot of our waterfront property in Moiliili and along the coast throughout the island of Oahu and the state of Hawaii. And we need to take action now, not in 15 years, not in 25 years. We need to take action now. This is one of the easiest ways to take action. I appreciate the leadership of the state fleets that will be provided in this bill. And I thank you for passing this bill and for the opportunity to testify, available for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Miyashiro with Blue Planet Foundation in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Blue Planet will stand on our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Dave Mullenix, our Revolution Hawaii in support.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On behalf of our 7,000 members statewide, we strongly support this proposal. It's important because, as I said earlier, climate change is not, my camera's not working here. Climate change is not waiting for us to get ready. It is already happening. And we all have to start getting on board, working together to address this problem. And the state having electric vehicles is the right step in the right direction. So we encourage you to pass this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Tiffany Yajima, Alliance for Automotive Innovation, offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Tiffany Yajima for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. The automobile manufacturers support the intent of this measure related to state fleets and would ask for a technical amendment as outlined in our testimony to clarify that the intent is the electrification of state fleets. This also aligns with the title of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Matt Geyer with Faith Action Environmental Justice Task Force in support.
Aloha, Chair. We'll stand on our testimony and just echo what Ted Boland said, that we need to move up the date. We need to act much sooner on climate change. So thank you for hearing this measure.
Thank you very much. Members, please note that that's the extent of our present testifiers indicating that they would testify on this measure SB 920. Please also note that we have numerous additional testimony offered in support by organizations and individuals on this same measure. Members, any questions on SB 920?
Chair, I have a question for DOT.
Representative Onishi.
Department of Transportation.
Yes, sir.
You, in your testimony, you talk about you are already in the process of conversion. You have a plan to be fully converted?
Yes, we do. Right now, we have a contract that allows us to pick up electric vehicles with no upfront money. It's basically we're being charged through a usage fee. This year, we're picking up 45 vehicles. The next year, we're probably going to try to swap out another 100, 150, 160 vehicles. And since it doesn't require any upfront monies, it's just basically a user fee, which includes maintenance. It's just like we're paying the vehicles, you know, as we go along. And which is kind of what we're doing now with the maintenance charges that we fees, not fees, but expenses that we incur. So we're very confident that we can get this done within 2 or 3 years.
And what's the savings in costs?
I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Did you do a cost analysis?
Yes, we did. I'm sorry, I don't have it with me right now.
In section 2, it calls for other motor vehicle requirements for medium and heavy duty motor vehicles. Have you started conversion of those?
Not yet, basically because trucks aren't available, but we expect them to be available within the next 3 to 4 years.
In the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah.
Do you have a conversion plan for those?
Yeah, basically, as soon as they come online, we'll start swapping them out.
Yeah, we've heard previous bills testimony that the amount of electric vehicles are currently somewhat limited. Do you know of medium and heavy duty electric motor vehicles that would suit your needs?
Not at this time, but there are some heavy vehicles coming up in the future, the semi-tractors, truck trailers. There are already some electric heavy equipment such as loaders and mini excavators, but they're not as available as the light vehicles right now.
Okay, what's the intention of your disposal of current vehicles?
Basically to turn them over to DAGs for resale.
No, I meant when you start replacing these vehicles.
You're talking about basically we're what we do when we replace our existing vehicles is we send them over to DAGs, and then they sell that off as part of their surplus.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 920? Okay, seeing no further questions, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 702. This is relating to education funding. This would require the Committee on Weights to submit a report to the legislature detailing any changes to the funding formula within 30 days of the final report. We have our first and only testifier on SB 702, the Department of Education, Brian Hallett, offering comments. Brian, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize for that. Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and committee members. Brian Hallett on behalf of Superintendent Kishimoto. The department stands on its written testimony with comments, and we're simply expressing a preference for the current practice required under the Sunshine Law, rather than having to add a new special reporting requirement into statute. So mahalo for the work you're doing on behalf of all of us.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the Department of Education? They're our sole testifier on this measure. Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next education bill, SB 813, relating to charter schools. This requires authorizers to provide each charter school it oversees a list of approved independent auditors. Let's see, do we have Yvonne Lau from the Hawaii State Public Charter School Commission?
I'm here, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify in strong support of this bill. We thank you for your consideration, and I'm here for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, please note we also have an additional piece of individual testimony offered in support of SB 813. Members, any questions on SB 813? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to SB 1004 relating to education. This, beginning with the 2021 to 22 school year, requires the DOE to include the teaching of financial literacy in the personal transition plan requirement for each student. We have Terry Ushijima with the Department of Education offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. I'm Teru Shijima, Assistant Superintendent, Interim Superintendent, testifying on behalf of Superintendent Christina Kishimoto. We stand on our written testimony and offer comments on SB 1004 HD1. We support the teaching of financial literacy education in schools. We respectfully request that the implementation of this measure commence in 2022 to 2023 school year to allow for the high schools to prepare for this requirement. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Terry. We also have Marvin Dang with Visa Incorporated.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Marvin Dangs on behalf of Visa. Visa is a strong leader in the area of financial literacy. It's been doing it for over 30 years. Certainly financial literacy is important, especially for students, high school students, to give them a real advantage later in life as adults. For that reason, Visa strongly supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. And we also have Stephanie Sakamoto, the Hawaii Credit Union League in support.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Stephanie Sakamoto on behalf of the Hawaii Credit Union League will stand in our testimony and support. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, please note that that's the extent of our present testifiers on SB 1004, but we also have individual testimony offered in support on this measure as well. Numerous pieces of individual testimony. Members, any questions on SB 1004? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to our next agenda item, leaving education, and moving on to SB 251. This is relating to transportation network companies, and this would establish regulatory requirements, permitting procedures for TNCs, as well as making permanent the insurance requirement for TNCs. The second part of this bill, members, is substantially similar to what we heard in HB and passed out of this committee, HB 264. Let's see, first off, we have the Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Chair. George Absedi again. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. We stand by our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bob Toyofuku with Uber in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Bob Toyofuku, testifying for Uber Technologies in support of this bill. I basically stand on the written testimony and just wanted to mention that Uber has been operating in the city and county of Honolulu since 2016 after the ordinance was passed, and I feel it's time to have a similar regulatory law on a statewide basis. All of the safety measures in the ordinance and that have been followed by Uber and the other TNC are in this bill, as well as the making the insurance law permanent. And so I respectfully ask this committee to pass the bill forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We also have Allison Ueoka with the Hawaii Insurers Council in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Allison Ueoka for Hawaii Insurers Council will stand on our support of the insurance provisions in the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's the extent of our present testifiers on SB 251. Please note we also have testimony in opposition and support from various organizations and businesses on this measure. Members, any questions on SB 251? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 251, then we'll move on to SB 646. This is relating to taxation. This would increase the amount of the rental motor vehicle surcharge from $5 to $8 for any county with a resident population of more than 125,000 but less than 195,000. It allocates the increase in surcharge tax revenues to the county sub-account within the state highway fund. On this measure, first off, we have the Department of Taxation offering comment.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Shiraishi for the Department of Taxation, and we stand on our written testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lena Rocky Regan with the Department of Transportation offering in support. Department of Transportation.
Chair Johansson, I think Lynn is not on. So this is George Epsidia again. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of this bill. We stand by our written testimony.
Thank you. We have Tom Yamachika with the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. Oh, okay. I guess he is not here. He offers comments. We have Kendall Matsuyoshi with Avis Budget Group in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, members of the committee. Kendall Matsuyoshi testifying on behalf of Avis Budget in opposition to the measure. We note that in just 2 years ago, the legislature raised the surcharge to $5. And so the industry as a whole is already contributing more than its fair share to the highway fund. And the pandemic caused such a big financial hardship for the industry as a whole. And so, you know, it was the local people that helped sustain the industry. And so this fee will affect them as well. And with more other options available, you know, with this surcharge, it might force other people, our visitors to look at other options. So this actually might result in less transaction days. So it might not get the same fees that you're looking for. So we ask that you hold this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Mihoko Ito with Enterprise Holdings in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Mihoko Ito on behalf of Enterprise. We oppose this measure. We do see it as a parity issue. Currently, rental cars are paying 26% of the total highway fund revenues, but only comprise 5% of the cars in the state. As the previous testifier noted, we are still also recovering from COVID impacts. And we note that this, for Enterprise anyway, that this doesn't just impact out-of-state visitors, but local residents as well. For Enterprise, that's about 15% of the total rental days that we have. We also noted in our testimony that if this bill moves forward, we would just ask the committee to consider blanking out the fee to consider a lesser increase and also adding an additional exemption to lessen the impact on local renters. And that exemption would be namely for rental cars provided in the situations where cars are a total loss or for theft rentals. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Members, please note that's the extent of our testifiers indicating that they would be present on this measure. We also have a testimony offering opposition, support, and comments on this measure from various organizations and businesses. Members, any questions on SB 646? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 646, then we'll move on to SB 57. This is relating to vehicle inspections. This codifies certain certifications, renewals, and violation processes of vehicle inspectors who conduct vehicle safety inspections under DOT. It repeals the requirement for reconstructed vehicles to obtain a special inspection and certification for a few years and then reenacts that requirement. It also requires DOTs to submit a report on the effects of the repeal. First off, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Chair Johansson, thank you very much. It's George Epsidia again with DOT. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. We stand by our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Calvin Tong with the Honolulu Police Department offering comment.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Major Calvin Tong with the Police Department. We stand in our support with our testimony.
Thank you. We also have Lee Kobian with Oahu Motorsports Association in support.
Hello. Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Johansson, committee members. Lee Kobian, Oahu Motorsports Association. We stand by a written testimony in support of Senate Bill 57 to repeal recon. Our organization advocates for motorsports fans and owners of hobby vehicles, ranging from exotic sports cars, Jeeps, crawlers, muscle cars, imports, hot rods, buggies, and even lowriders. Basically, our weekend fun cars, and which are class 1 and 2 GVW category vehicles. And they're classified by the Federal Highway Administration as light duty vehicles. I state this because there was concern that if recon is gone, all of a sudden our weekend fun cars are gonna tear up the roads more. I don't know where that came from, but I just let people know that these vehicles are considered light duty vehicles. Oahu is the only island with recon. It's not an issue on the neighbor islands. And I want to clarify and emphasize that safety inspection requirements will still remain. And keep in mind, safety inspections are more stringent than the recon ever was. Recon only started in the 60s, not for safety, but to inspect vehicles for stolen parts, which is prevalent back then, we hope the committee passes this bill to repeal recon, and thank you for allowing us to testify.
Thank you very much. Members, please note that's the extent of our present testifiers on SB 57, indicating that they would be present virtually to testify. Please note there are numerous supportive testimonies proffered by various organizations and individuals in support of this measure. Members, any questions on SB 57? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 57, then we'll take up our last transportation related measure on this agenda, SB 755. This is relating to transportation, requires lessors of rental motor vehicles to include an option for the lessee in the motor vehicle rental agreement to contribute a sum to DLNR for the preservation and protection of the environment. Let's see. First off, we have the Department of Land and Natural Resources in support. DLNR, are you here to testify in SB 755? David Smith of DLNR? Okay, members, please note that DLNR is in support. Next, we have Kendall Matsuyoshi with Avis Budget Group in opposition.
Hi, good afternoon again, Chair. Kendall Matsuyoshi testifying on behalf of Avis Budget in opposition to the measure. This measure would create an administrative burden to offer consumers this option who may want to check this option. With Hawaii already having one of the highest rental surcharge amounts in the country, there may not be enough interest for these people to have this box checked off. So we ask that maybe a study be done first before we having any requirements for this type of measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. We also have Mihoko Ito with Enterprise Holdings in opposition.
Good afternoon again, Chair and members. Mihoko Ito on behalf of Enterprise. We'll stand on our testimony in opposition and just note that Enterprise already does offer a voluntary carbon offset fee on all of its current contracts, so we don't feel another one is necessary at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. That's the extent of our testifiers. Any questions on SB 755? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 755, then we'll move on to the labor portion of our agenda, SB 675, relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund. This would amend the definition of employee beneficiary to include surviving unmarried adult child of a deceased retired member, provided that the child is incapable of self-support due to a mental or physical incapacity, which existed prior to the unmarried child's reaching of the age of majority, which is 18. On SB 675, Department of Budget and Finance. Oh, actually, no one has indicated that they would be present to testify on this measure. But please note, members, there are comments provided by departments and agencies, as well as a supportive testimony provided by an individual. Seeing as there's no one to ask questions to on this measure, we'll move on to the next agenda item, SB 936. Yes, SB 936 relating to public health. And this requires employers to provide employees access to seizure first aid information specified by the Department of Health. On SB 936, we have our single and only testifier on this measure, Brennan Yamaguchi. Hi, Brennan. Welcome.
Hello. This single piece of paper right here is all I'm asking for. My name is Brennan Yamaguchi. I'm 12 years old and I'm a 6th grader at Marino School. I'm asking you as fellow members of my community to help support Senate Bill 936 related to public health. This piece of paper provides information about first aid and lessons suffering and maybe even save lives in the workplace and the community. 1 in every 26 people may be affected by epilepsy and a similar condition in their life. 10% of the population may experience a seizure in their lifetime. You do not need to have epilepsy to have this seizure either. Seizures can occur from fevers, diabetes, strokes, and taking the wrong medicines, and even recently from COVID-19. You can have a seizure from head injuries or fall such from a car accident during the course of a business. If your warehouse or job involves heat exposure, whether the sun, equipment, or chemical-related seizures can occur. Anyone entering a workplace as a visitor, customer, or vendor and is prone to a seizure also poses a hazard. So how do you get this piece of paper? It's free and you can download it from several places. Posters and guidelines can be downloaded free, and organizations like OSHA actually encourages that on their website. Please see my written testimony for the link. Perhaps this poster can be easily added to or credited within existing training or posters that the state already requires. Just a piece of paper right here is what I'm asking for. Senate Bill 936 is simple. I want seizure first aid to be available in workplaces. I want a healthy environment for all the people on this call, especially state-related buildings and offices. Prior to the pandemic, we remember when hundreds of visitors at the state capitol. I know you pray for the days those doors will open again soon. To prepare for this, I want to protect you. I want to protect the people coming to see you. Hazards aren't only onto our workers, but to those who visit. I have been very blessed to have a wonderful education and a loving family. At Marino School, we practice noblesse oblige. To whom much is given, much is expected. You might be surprised to hear this, but I do not have epilepsy. I've never had a seizure. However, I have friends who do, and I want to help them. I hope you want to help them too. I look forward to working with the Department of Health. Please join me and help support Senate Bill 936. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brennan. Great job. Members, that's our stellar testifier. Brennan is our one and only testifier, indicating that they would be testifying in this measure, but please note there are various organizations and other individuals offering supportive testimony on this measure. Members, any questions on SB 936 for today's testifier of the day? Okay, so you did such a great job, Brennan. No one has any questions for you. Great job. We will move on then from SB 936 to our next agenda item that begins the health section of this agenda. We have SB 819, and this is relating to the hospital sustainability program. Please note, members, that we heard and passed out a substantially similar bill out of this committee, HB 474. This is fairly similar. On SB 891, we have the Department of Human Services, Judy Moore-Peterson, in support.
Hi, good afternoon. I appreciate you hearing this bill. We stand on our written testimony and strong support, available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Hilton Rayfel with the Hawaii, the Healthcare Association of Hawaii in support.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. Hilton Wraithall, President CEO of the Healthcare Association of Hawaii. We stand in strong support of this measure and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Michael Robinson with Hawaii Pacific Health in support. Michael Robinson with Hawaii Pacific Health. Oh, sorry. I thought you said present. You were saying not present. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have that. Sorry, my apologies. Is not here, but in support. We also have Colette Masunaga with the Queens Healthcare System in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Colette Masunaga. On behalf of the Queens Health Systems, we stand in strong support and appreciate the committee's consideration in passing out this piece of legislation. Mahalo.
Thank you. Members, that's all the testifiers indicating that they would be present on this measure. Members, any questions on SB 819? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on then to SB 827. This is relating to breast cancer screening. Please note that we saw a substantially similar bill, HB 309, which we passed out of this committee, which the HHH chair also inserted into this bill. This is relating to breast cancer screening, and it would expand breast cancer coverage, would expand coverage of breast cancer screening and imaging to include different forms of mammography based on risk factor screenings. On SB 827, we have Commissioner Hayashida with the Insurance Division of DCCA.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony offering comments on this bill. I will highlight that we are seeking confirmation for CMS that this is or this is not a new mandate. And then I would also like to highlight that excluding Kaiser from such proposal would create a unlevel playing field. And additionally, the insurance division would be happy to do the report that's stated in the bill. It will be available for comments and questions, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Next, we have the Department of Health, Health Resources Administration, offering comments. Department of Health on SB 827.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa and members of the committee. I'm testifying on behalf of Director Elizabeth Char with Department of Health. We stand by our written testimony, and I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. We also have Lindsay Garcia with HMSA in opposition.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia from HMSA. We stand on our testimony and are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, please note we also have testimony from various organizations in support and opposition, as well as individuals offering support on this measure, considering that's the extent of our present testifiers on SB 827. Members, any questions on SB 827? Okay, seeing none, I have one quick question. Commissioner Hayashida, are you still with us?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Just a quick confirmation. So I think because where this is matters. Are you pursuing confirmation from CMS that it's a new insurance mandate, or have you received the confirmation that it is indeed?
No, we have not received it. I did query CMS this morning, and they said they will get back to me as soon as possible.
Okay, So this may trigger associated costs for the state under the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act if CMS deems that it is a new insurance mandate, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Members, any additional questions on SB 827? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner. I'm
No,
sorry.
I was just going to say, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to say that we would get back to you as soon as we found out what the response was from CMS.
Thank you. That would be helpful. And if you can also let the Health and Human Services Chair know as well. I know he and I have had conversations about this, so he'll be anxious to find out as well.
I will do that, sir.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Members, any other questions on HB 827? Sorry, SB 827. Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 1139. This is relating to the Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation. This authorizes Department of Health to set patient registration fees by administrative rulemaking and appropriates monies from the Medical Cannabis Registry and Regulation Special Fund for positions in operation, including administrative services of the Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation. It requires the office to convene a task force on the effect of legalization of cannabis on qualifying medical cannabis patients. On SB 1139, we have the Department of Health Resources Administration in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. Michelle Makata, Department of Health, on behalf of Director Dr. Elizabeth Char. The department stands on its testimony as submitted, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Akamai Cannabis Clinic, Dr. Clifton Otto, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this measure. My name is Dr. Clifton Otto, and I stand on my written testimony, which offers 3 amendments that I believe would support increasing the Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulations capabilities as the program continues to grow and as medical expertise will continue to be even more essential for proper regulatory oversight, health education, and protecting patient safety. So thank you for considering my testimony, and I will be available for any questions. Aloha.
Thank you very much, Dr. Otto. We also have Jacqueline Moore with Big Island Grown Dispensaries in support.
Aloha. Yes, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Jacqueline Moore, pharmacist and CEO with Big Island Grown. We stand in support of SB 1139. I can personally attest to the fact that the Department of Health has been incredibly engaged with at least all of the licensees. We receive correspondence off hours, on the weekends, on holidays, during vacation time. It's really through the dedication, incredible efforts of the staff they have, but I do know that it appears they're spread very thin. Not sure how sustainable it is. So we're completely in support of any funding that would be required for them to, effectively oversee and run this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Members, please note that that's the extent of testifiers indicating that they would be present virtually to testify on SB 1139. We also have organizational and individual testimony in support and opposition on this same measure. Members, any questions on SB 1139? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 1139, then we'll move on to SB 1258. This is relating to telehealth. This would authorize the establishment of a physician-patient relationship via telehealth interaction. Also substantially similar to the next bill, which is SB 970. In the HHH committee, they inserted into SB 1253 a bill which we passed out of CPC, which was HB 473. So it's substantially similar to something we've heard and passed out of this committee previously. On SB 1258, we have the Healthcare Association of Hawaii, Paige Heckathorn Choi, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. We will stand on our testimony and support.
Thank you. Next, we have the Hawaii Psychological Association, Raymond Folan in support.
Aloha.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you, Chair Johansson and Vice Chair Kitagawa and members of the committee. As you had just mentioned, Chair Johansson, the original intent of SB 1258 was to include telehealth contacts, telephone contacts in the definition of telehealth. The reason was that even now there are many people in Hawaii, particularly those living in rural areas and those that are elderly, who do not have broadband access or unlimited cell phone data plans. And for them, setting up a healthcare video conference is extremely difficult, if not impossible. So the bill in its original form, it passed through the Senate Health Committee and the Senate Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee with that intent. And when it was heard in the House by the Health, Human Services and Homelessness Committee, the bill was gutted and replaced by a bill completely unrelated to SB 1258. The committee report stated that they replaced SB 1258 language with the language from HB 473 because it was, quote, a substantially similar measure. Actually, the intent of these bills is entirely different, and there was no clear need to switch the content, as the language in HB 473 can be found in other bills, as you mentioned, the one that's very next on your agenda today. So the testimony we submitted in support of this bill was based on what we thought was the original language. We are extremely disappointed with the change, and we urge the committee to return the bill to its original form with the intent of including telephone contacts within the definition of telehealth. We know from experience and solid research that mental health services delivered via telephone are very effective. Including audio-only services in the definition of telehealth is an equity equalizer. It bridges the digital divide, and it will allow our providers and our patients to get the services they need. So in summary, the Hawaii Psychological Association strongly supports the original intent of the bill and asks you to return it to and pass it in its original form. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Folan. Members, that's the extent of our present testifiers who are here virtually to testify on SB 1258. Please note that we also have numerous additional supportive testimonies proffered by organizations and individuals on this measure. Members, any questions on SB 1258? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll move on to SB 970 relating to telehealth. And this is, again, authorizing a physician-patient relationship via telehealth interaction, precipitated by our ongoing pandemic, but probably hastening needed change anyway. On SB 970, we have Alani Kyogi, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Hawaii Medical Board in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'll stand on my written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Paige Hackathorn Choi, Hawaii Healthcare Association of Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Chair. We will take this opportunity to stand in strong support of this measure, noting that we did support the previous bill and the intent of inserting the clarification that this bill provides for establishing a physician-provider relationship. This measure is a priority for our members and a number of our partners and other stakeholders in the field, and we would prefer this measure as the vehicle moving forward, as this is the measure that has that wide consensus from our partners. We do appreciate your continued support of ensuring access to telehealth, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Hawaii Pacific Health, Michael Robinson in support.
Good afternoon, Chair. Mike Robinson, Hawaii Pacific Health, and we'll stand at our written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Members, please note that's the extent of our testifiers indicating that they would be present on SB 970. We also have numerous pieces of testimony in support from various agencies, organizations, and individuals. Members, any questions on SB 970? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 562. This is relating to deceptive trade practices. We're leaving our health section of the agenda behind and moving toward economic development. This would establish that charging shipping and delivery charges that exceed the actual cost to ship or deliver a commodity to a consumer in Hawaii constitutes an unfair and deceptive practice. On SB 562, we have Steve Levins, Office of Consumer Protection, DCCA, in support.
Good afternoon. Steve Levins from Office of Consumer Protection. This is a good bill. It addresses inequities that the people of Hawaii have had to bear for years and years and years. When you order merchandise, people from Hawaii often experience phantom charges, supposedly for shipping a good to Hawaii. What this bill does is it limits those charges to the actual costs of shipping goods to Hawaii. I mean, there's no question that shipping something to Hawaii from the mainland costs more than shipping it to another state on the mainland. But what we have found over the years is that merchants will put some kind of arbitrary charge or fee just because the product is being shipped to Hawaii. We don't think this is fair. In many cases, it's deceptive, and we think that this bill does a good job of correcting those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. We also have Myung Oh with the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii offering comments. Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. Okay, they have left the hearing. We also have the Hawaii Food Industry Association in opposition.
Good afternoon again, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFIA. We stand on our testimony in opposition to this measure, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have the late testimony from Retail Merchants of Hawaii, Tina Yamaki, in opposition.
Aloha, and thank you, Chair Johansson, for letting us to testify, and I apologize for it being late. We are in opposition of this bill. What a lot of people don't understand is that, online shipping or online buying has gone up, especially during this pandemic. People have found that they don't want to leave their home and how easy it is. But when you check out, you actually find out what the shipping cost to Hawaii is, and at that time, it's the customer's ability to decide not to order from that one particular merchant because the same product is probably being offered on other places. A lot of times consumers are looking for free shipping. And, a lot of these times, we also got to understand that shipping to Hawaii doesn't all come in flat weight boxes. Different companies may have the same shipper, but their costs are all different. Bigger companies are going to be able to ship cheaper than smaller companies. And once you kind of let people know what the actual shipping cost is or what their cost is, it's proprietary information too, and it helps out their competition. A lot of times too, when you talk about shipping costs, it also includes the materials that are used to ship, the boxes, time to put it together, making sure that things don't break. So that is also included in your shipping costs. We also want to point out that this bill has a good possibility of being challenged under the Federal Commerce Clause on interstate commerce. Some of my members have already started to look into that and are starting to talk about it as well. When you have a bill like this, it can also turn off online sellers to Hawaii where they will no longer ship anything to Hawaii. And that's going to leave, Hawaii residents less options to shop at. Third-party flat rate shipping also charges, it's on the mainland. You have a lot of cheap shipping because they can do ground shipping. We can't do ground shipping to Hawaii because we live on an island. So everything has to be flown in or boated in. And customers want that merchandise in 2 days, if not within hours. So we need to look at those type of things too. It's not as simple as just putting a flat rate price on shipping. I'll be available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Members, please note that's the extent of our present testifiers. We also have additional comments provided by an organization. Members, any questions on SB 562, excuse me, SB 562?
I have a question.
Okay, just talk in your mic.
A quick question for DCCA.
Yes.
How is this going to be enforced?
Well, it'd be enforced like anything else. I mean, if it was brought to our attention that a company is charging more than the actual charges, it'd be subject to an unfair or deceptive trade practice. It's no different than any other case or matter that we would enforce. Someone filed a complaint, we would investigate. If it's determined, for instance, that a company is charging an amount in shipping that is grossly excessive what their actual shipping costs are, it would be in violation of the law.
Okay. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Members, any other additional questions on SB 562?
Sure.
Representative
I have a question
Onishi.
for DCCA.
Yes.
In this bill, does it prohibit any of the expenses associated with shipping? For example, packing materials, other types of potential charges that might be incurred?
In my view, no. I mean, that would be an ancillary cost associated with shipping. If it costs them, to include the packaging, the cost of packing it, that would be an actual cost of shipping the product. This bill is not attacking any kind of business for imposing a flat rate, if in fact that flat rate reflects the actual costs. The bill is designed to correct a problem, an issue that we faced in Hawaii and frankly in Alaska too for years and years and years. It's getting better, but there are companies on the mainland that think that somehow shipping a product to Hawaii is shipping it to Mars. I mean, the costs, they're entitled to pass along those costs, those increased costs of shipping a product to Hawaii. There's no question about that. We're not asking a business to take a loss on shipping to Hawaii. They're entitled to recoup their costs for shipping a product to Hawaii. But if they're going to be shipping a product to Hawaii, those costs should reflect what the actual cost of shipping is. And we have seen over the years that merchants will just pick arbitrary figures like $25, $30 to ship something to here. And of course, it's their prerogative not to ship something to Hawaii because of, whatever other factors are associated. But if they can recoup what their actual costs are for shipping the product, I don't believe that there is any kind of deterrent against them from shipping the product. They should not be making a profit on shipping something if in fact in excess of what the actual shipping costs are. What their profit should be referenced to is what the cost of the item is. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Mr. Levins, does this bill in any way establish a flat rate for all shipping?
No, absolutely not. All it does is it mandates that if you're a merchant and you're charging for shipping to Hawaii, the cost of shipping should reflect what the actual cost of shipping the product is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 5?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Han.
thank you. Ms. Yamaki, Retail Merchants Association.
Yes, Representative.
Good afternoon, Ms. Yamaki. Thank you for your testimony. And I found both your testimony and Mr. Levin's testimony extremely compelling. So you just heard the testimony of Mr. Levins. Can you respond to that? Because I think this is a serious problem that, again, we in Hawaii and Alaska are always somehow, being kind of gouged for shipping costs. And what you're saying, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I want you to be able to respond because I don't necessarily think you guys are, I don't think that you guys are in your testimony is in opposition. It just seems that you're talking about things like the actual cost of shipping, like the packaging of goods, etc. But can you kind of respond to what he's saying? Because I don't actually think you guys don't actually have opposing positions.
So basically, there is already a law in the books that says, you know, you can't do any deceptive trade practices anyway. And number two is, you know, in the last 5 years, shopping has changed a lot. A lot of people have been purchasing online, and customers now, you know, they want it in hours. It's not like a week from now. They want it, you know, if it's to Hawaii, it's 1 or 2 days, they want that shipping. So a lot of companies that do offer free shipping, you know, they might pass on, or they might average it out across a lot of the other things that may have to pay for shipping. Or what they're doing is, you know, also doing for the packaging and everything else. It's not that deceptive. And as the internet has grown, the consumer is very much aware of who has free shipping or cheap shipping, and they can find whatever product, unless it's only by that company who makes it. They'll find it on another site and order it from there. Online shopping has become very, very competitive in the last few years. So the shopper is smart enough to know that, you know, if somebody is charging exorbitant amount for shipping, they're probably not going to shop there and give them bad reviews. And we know that for a fact.
Okay, and I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I think, again, what Mr. Levins is essentially, the crux of his testimony is that there has to be some correlation with the actual cost of shipping, with the actual price, versus just some arbitrary, capricious amount that's being levied against the, maybe levy is not the word, but that's being used against the buyer. And so again, what I'm trying to understand your testimony, Mr. Yamaki, because I understand what you're saying. Yes, there are costs involved, and the shoppers are smart. And of course, I mean, I'm always looking for free shipping. That's like the first thing I look for, because of course, I genuinely believe that we are taken advantage of here in Hawaii. And I'm not saying it's, you know, but I do believe that. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't necessarily think what you're saying is in opposition to what Mr. Levins is saying, because he's essentially saying there needs to be a correlation. The actual cost of shipping should reflect that, not be some arbitrary, capricious amount. And are you saying that are you saying that on behalf of that, sometimes those costs are not necessarily reflected because of things like advanced shipping, 2-day shipping, 1-day shipping, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and also too, you got to understand that this whole online shipping and stuff has changed within the last few years too. Yeah. It's changed tremendously. So, you know, majority of the retailers that are legitimate, I mean, they don't overcharge for shipping. You're always going to get, you know, a couple of bad apples who don't want to ship to Hawaii or are trying to make a profit on it. But those types of online services, they don't last very long because customers stop going to them. They're finding it easy to Google up another company that they can get the product for the same price or cheaper with free or very cheap shipping. The concern that we have too is if it's only the actual cost of the shipping, I'm going to find out, you know, what company A is charging for their shipping and company B, and that might be proprietary information. You don't want to know what's in the contract, or you don't want your competitors to know what is in your contract. And that's a very huge concern for us if it's just for the shipping cost. You know, yeah.
Okay,
there's
no,
a lot of more.
understand.
I think it's a lot more than what just the bill looks at. It's a little deeper than that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think one of the other concerns, Mr. Levins, can I have you on very quickly?
Yes.
Mr. Levins, I know this is under section 481B. This would be adding a new section to 481B, but to the best of my recollection, under unfair and deceptive trade practices, aren't there treble damages included? Do you know offhand?
If you were to, not for the state, the penalties are $500 to $10,000 per violation. But for private practitioners, yes. You can get treble damages.
Okay, so this would be creating, this is just this would not, I can't see it in this bill because it's such a short bill, but this is not this doesn't allow private right of action. This is just, or is it? Or is this a state action? I'm trying, I don't see it.
No, it's not limited to state action. If it's an
Okay.
unfair deceptive trade practice, there.
Okay, so if a private consumer did want to bring a charge, let's say this was to become law, then they would actually have potentially the ability to recover treble damages against the shipper or the seller.
That's correct, but I mean, if someone is ordering something and the item is $50, it would be treble damages of $50.
That's correct. Okay, great, got it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Levins. Thanks, Ms. Yamaki. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any other additional questions on SB 562? Okay, seeing no further questions, then we'll move on to SB 1202 relating to taxation. This makes various technical amendments to Chapter 243, 244, and 245 relating to fuel, liquor, cigarette, and tobacco tax laws. We have our one and only testifier on this measure, Department of Taxation, in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tetsuya Ishii for the Department of Taxation, and we stand in strong support of this technical measure. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging with us, Ted. Members, any questions there are also comments, but the testifier is no longer here on SB 1202. Members, any questions for the Department of Taxation? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll move on to our last agenda item. SB 1313, this is relating to sport fishing. This would require the Division of Aquatic Resources at DLNR to establish a pilot project to restock the Wahiawa public fishing area with northern largemouth bass, butterfly, peacock bass, or both. On SB 1313, we only have one testifier. DLNR still okay. One testifier, the Department of Agriculture, offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Johansson, committee members. The Department of Agriculture will stand on its, Morrisata for the department. The department will stand on its written testimony offering comments. The gist of it is that we believe that what is being sought by this measure can be done without any new legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Members, we also have comments and supportive testimony proffered by various organizations and individuals. Members, any questions for the Department of Agriculture on SB 1313? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll recess for decision making. Recess. Okay, reconvening our decision-making for this Tuesday, March 23, 2 p.m. agenda of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee. My thanks to everyone who testified today, as well as our members for sticking with us during this hearing. First off, on SB 566, the recommendation will be to make further clarifying technical and non-substantive amendments, but also clarifying the ability of LRB to solicit input from any entity they think is necessary to complete the study, as well as various technical and non-substantive amendments. Members, any questions on the recommendation for SB 566? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 566, SD1, HD1 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino. Representative Har.
Aye.
Representative Hashem.
Aye.
Representative Kong.
Aye.
Representative Mizuno.
Aye.
Representative Morikawa.
Aye.
Representative Onishi.
Aye.
Representative Tarnas.
Aye.
Representative Matsumoto.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, on SB 659 relating to the low-income housing tax credit. I'm going to recommend that we keep this measure moving, but with the prior concurrence of the housing chair, I'm going to blank out in section 4 the 2027 date for the extension of the credit, the 6-year extension. I'd also like to note in the committee report for finance where it moves to next, for them to take a look at whether the extension of the 6 years of credit is likely tax relief and may run afoul of the recently passed federal relief. And we'll let Finn arbiter this out of an abundance of caution given the 2021 expiration date. This echoes the concerns as noted by DOTAX, BNF, and others. Members, any questions on the suggested amendment? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 659, SD2, HD1 with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, on SB 749, the recommendation is going to be to defer this measure at this time. I think, although there are some very valid issues that need to be explored that the Hawaii Public Housing Authority has brought up, I think this issue warrants further consultation and significant discussions, perhaps during the interim between different stakeholder groups to arrive at something that may be more mutually amenable to all parties. So again, the recommendation on SB 749 will be to defer this measure. On SB 348, relating to bottled water, my recommendation will be to insert a defective date of January 1, 2050, and this is with the prior concurrence of the EEP chair. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 348, SD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, on SB 756 relating to electric cars, the recommendation here will be to blank out the appropriations, note them in the committee report. Also note several additional things in the committee report, including that nothing precludes businesses or public locations from charging to recoup some of their costs. I'd also like to note that this bill would be further improved by defining reasonable cost. So I'd like to note that in the committee report as well. And I'd like to note in the committee report that should this bill be further considered, that the committee has concerns of whether or not this should just apply to new construction as opposed to the retroactively applying to all properties. I should note that the blanking out of the appropriations and that a specific amendment to the bill does have the prior concurrence of the EEP chair, and the bill is already defective in its effective date. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Oh, Representative Kong.
Well, sticking in the requirement of 5 stalls per 100 stalls by 2025 is of great concern to me, so I will be voting no on that one.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, then Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 756 ST2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Representative Matsumoto? Are there any other noes other than Representative Kong? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Next on SB 920 relating to light duty vehicles. Here I'd like to amend the measure by adopting the Alliance for Automotive, I always have trouble with that one, Automotive Innovation, taking their amendment. I did receive the prior concurrence of the EP chair, and this makes it specific that we're just talking about the state fleet as opposed to the entire state. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 920 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, SB 702 relating to education funding. The recommendation is to pass this measure as is and without amendment. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 702 SD2 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, SB 813 relating to charter schools. The recommendation is to also pass this measure as is and without amendment. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 813 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, on SB 1004 relating to education with the prior concurrence of the education chair, I'd like to adopt DOE's amendment of delaying by 1 school year the implementation of this new financial literacy curriculum. And it already has a defective date. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1004 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 251 relating to transportation networks. I'd like to amend this measure with a clarifying amendment, changing the verbiage to ensure that a TNC, a transportation network company, and a transportation network company driver not being considered a motor carrier. And while the definition in the bill sort of says that, it says that in a slightly confusing way. So I'd just like to clarify that and make it a little bit more explicit. It already has a defective date. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 251 SD2 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Representative Kong, reservations. Are there any additional reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, in consultation with the transportation chair, my thanks to him for his assistance on this measure. I'd like to amend SB 646 relating to taxation in the following ways. I'd like to blank out the specific amounts of the increase in terms of whether or not it should be $8. We'll note in the committee report that it was 8, but I'd like to, we'd like to further discussion on what the appropriate increase should be. Also adopting enterprises amendments, narrowing the scope of applicability to encourage further discussion. It already has a defective date. And my thanks again to the transportation chair for your assistance on this. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation on SB 646? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 646 SD2 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, also with the prior concurrence and advice of the House Transportation Chair, I'd like to amend SB 57 by including that the report should be proffered 30 days prior to the convening of the legislative session, just so that the legislature has time to digest the Department of Transportation's report. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 57 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And again, my thanks to the Transportation Chair for his assistance and counsel on this. On SB 755 relating to transportation, the recommendation here is to move this measure as is without amendments. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 755 SD1 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, my thanks to the Labor and Tourism Chair for our next section with the concurrence of the Labor and Tourism Chair on SB 675. I'd simply like to insert a different effective date of January 1, 2050 to make sure that the House has made some amendments, but it has to come back to us and ensure further consultation with the House. I'd also like to make sure that the bill description notices the correct effective date, which is defective and will be January 1, 2050 to encourage further discussion. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 675 SD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And again, my thanks also to the Labor and Tourism Chair for his counsel on SB 936. The recommendation here will be to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 936 SD2 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 819, with the prior concurrence of the Health and Human Services Chair, the recommendation here will just be to blank out the appropriations and note them in the committee report. It already has a defective date. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, thank you for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 819 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next on SB 827 relating to breast cancer screening. While the Health and Human Services Committee as well as the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee await further clarification from Insurance Commissioner Hayashida on whether or not this bill may have some unintended consequences of constituting a new insurance mandate, which then runs afoul of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. While we wait for that confirmation from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the recommendation, because this is the only vehicle alive, is to keep this moving and to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is for SB 827 SD2 HD1 is to pass as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 1139 relating to the Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation, the recommendation here is to pass this measure as is. It already has a House draft and a defective date. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1139 SD2 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 1258, the recommendation is to defer this measure as it is substantially similar to the next measure, SB 970, which I would like to move instead. And I'd like to move this bill on as is. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation on SB 970? I'm sorry, just to clarify again, SB 1258 was deferred. Okay, seeing no questions on 970, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 970 SD2 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 562, with the prior concurrence of the ECD chair, I'd like to insert a defective date of January 1, 2050 to make sure that there has to be continued further discussion with the House. Members, any comments or questions on this measure? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 562 SD1 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 1202, similar recommendation is to amend this measure by also inserting its effective date of January 1, 2050 to make sure that we ensure further discussion. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1202 SD1 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And lastly, members, on SB 1313 relating to sport fishing, the recommendation here with the prior concurrence of the Water and Land Chair, and my thanks to council on this, is to move the pilot program back for 1 year to January 2023 to ensure more time for DOA permits, as well as potentially the filling of the biologist position. I would like to note in the committee report, though, that DLNR should be working throughout to stand up this program by 2023, this pilot program. Members, any comments or questions on the suggested amendment? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1313 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. This meeting is adjourned.